Prima, the first Prime, the actual first one. Primus, the god of the Transformers, made 13 beings to fight the Chaos God Unicron, and Prima was the first one off the line. He got the Star Saber, a blade literally forged from a star, and the job of leading the others. Not because he was the strongest or the smartest, but because he was the template. Every Prime that came after him was trying to be what Prima already was. The war against Unicron ended, the 13 scattered, and Prima faded into myth. No dramatic last stand, no big sacrifice. He just became the name at the top of every Prime bloodline like a founding father nobody actually remembers. And that's the weird thing about Prima's story. The first Prime, the one Primus trusted most, basically walked off into the cosmos and disappeared. If he was so perfect, why did everything that came after him go so wrong? Keep that in mind. Vector Prime. Imagine you can see every version of history that ever existed. Every timeline where things went right. Every timeline where they didn't. Every civilization that rose and died before anyone was around to notice. Now imagine carrying all of that inside your head for billions of years, while the present keeps happening around you. That's Vector Prime's whole situation. Primus gave him domain over time and space itself, tasked him with keeping the time stream intact across every dimension and every era. His sword, Rizzling, can cut through dimensional barriers. His ship, Lemuria, exists partially outside normal space. Even the other original Primes treated him differently, not quite like a peer, more like something ancient that happened to be on their side. In the Cybertron animated series, Vector Prime sacrifices himself to save reality. And the reason that hits differently once you understand him is because he's seen every version of how the story ends. He chose the one where everyone else survives. That's what billions of years of watching history does to you. It doesn't make you powerful. It makes you willing. Alpha Trion. Before Optimus Prime was Optimus Prime, he was Orion Pax, a dock worker, a young archivist with no particular destiny attached to his name. The being responsible for changing that never picked up a weapon to do it. Alpha Trion is one of the original 13, and he survived everything. Every war, every fall, every age of Cybertron. While other Primes fought or disappeared, he quietly became the most important figure in Autobot history without anyone clocking exactly how. He kept the Covenant of Primus, an ancient text that recorded history before it happened. He built the Hall of Records, the archive of all Cybertronian knowledge. And when a young Orion Pax nearly died after an attack, Alpha Trion rebuilt him, and in doing so set the course of an entire civilization. Now here's the part that makes it weirder. Some lore suggests Alpha Trion and A3, a rebel figure from Cybertron's early history, are the same being, which would mean he wasn't just advising from the sidelines. He was inside the events themselves, under different names, shaping things from the ground up, and nobody ever connected the dots. The archivist was also the revolutionary. He just made sure nobody figured that out until it was too late to do anything about it. Solus Prime. Every legendary weapon in Transformer history has a maker. The Star Saber, the Forge. Artifacts that decided the outcomes of wars across millions of years. All of them came from her. Solus Prime was the craftsman of the original 13, and she wasn't just good at it. The things she built functioned almost like extensions of Primus himself. Her artifact, the Forge of Solus Prime, could create objects of impossible power from raw materials. Any single one of her creations in the wrong hands, and you've got the end of a civilization. And then you get to the part of her story the lore treats like an open wound, because Solus Prime and Megatronus, the Prime who later became the Fallen, were bonded partners, and Megatronus killed her. Whether it was an accident or deliberate depends on which version you follow, but the result was always the same. The original 13, the group that was supposed to be eternal, fell apart because of it. Grief, rage, betrayal, all of it starting with her death. She never got to see what her weapons did to history. Every time a Prime picks up something she made and swings it, she's there in it, just not in a way she ever got to choose. Micronus Prime. Most people sleep on this one, which is exactly the problem. Micronus Prime was the smallest of the 13, literally the first minicon, and his whole power set sounds underwhelming until you actually think about what it means. Every other original Prime had power that lived inside themselves. Micronus had power that doubled everyone else's. By bonding with other Cybertronians, he could amplify their abilities to levels they couldn't hit on their own. His artifact, the Chimera Stone, let him share and stack that effect across multiple beings at once. In a war, that's not a support role. That's the reason the other 12 could do what they did. You take any Prime on this list and put Micronus with them, and you've just made whatever threat they already were significantly worse for whoever's on the receiving end. He was the reason the army hit harder than it should have. And in the aligned continuity, Micronus shows up again in modern times, still existing, still talking, passing perspective to Optimus when the weight of everything gets too heavy. The smallest Prime, the one who spent his whole existence making everyone else stronger, and in the end the only thing he had left to give was words. Somehow that still turned out to be enough. Alchemist Prime. Not every Prime was built for war. Alchemist Prime Prime was built for questions. Back when science and mysticism weren't two different things but the same thing with different names depending on who you ask, Alchemist Prime was the one studying how everything actually worked at the fundamental level. His artifact, the lenses, let him see past the surface of anything, right down to the true nature of whatever he was looking at. In some lore, his work played a role in bridging the gap between transformers and organic life, which means his research had implications for basically every living thing in the universe, not just Cybertron. He's one of the less documented originals. And honestly, that's exactly what makes him interesting in a group full of weapons and warriors and world enders. He was the one asking questions instead of throwing punches. The answers were apparently significant enough to stay buried for millions of years. The Transformers lore hides its most important stuff inside its quietest characters. Alchemist Prime might be the furthest this goes. Nexus Prime, every combiner in Transformer history, every team that merges into one giant terrifying machine, exists because of this one. Nexus Prime was the first combiner, the proof that multiple sparks could merge into a single consciousness without tearing each other apart. His artifact was the enigma of combination, the object that made every Autobot gestalt that ever existed possible. Devastator, Superion, Menasur, all of them trace back to what Nexus Prime figured out. He could split into 5 separate Transformers and reform at will, carrying multiple personalities and perspectives that somehow functioned as one coherent thing, which made him weirdly good at diplomacy as well as combat. He understood what it meant to be divided and unified at the same time, because he literally lived both states constantly. What does identity mean when you can split into 5 people, and each of them is technically you? Nexus Prime didn't write a philosophy paper about it. He just existed as the answer. Every gestalt that ever roared a single name while being 5 people at once is his legacy walking around in the wasteland. Onyx Prime, most of the original 13 showed up in robot forms. Towering metal warriors built for a cosmic war. Onyx Prime showed up as a beast, a massive winged predator, and from the jump that told you the 13 weren't all made the same way and weren't supposed to be. His job wasn't to fight armies or forge weapons or guard timelines. It was to understand something older than any of that. Primal instinct, organic life, the forces that existed before Cybertron had a name. His artifact, the Triptych Mask, let him talk to the dead and pull wisdom from fallen warriors. He's also one of the founding figures of Predacon mythology, with some lore suggesting the entire lineage of beast mode Transformers traces back to him. And then there's the thread that makes his story genuinely weird, because in some continuities, the connection between Onyx Prime and Shockwave, the coldest and most calculating Decepticon scientist in the franchise, runs way deeper than coincidence. The details shift depending on which version you're following, but the implication stays the same. The most primal of the 13 and the most logical Decepticon might be the same story wearing 2 very different masks across millions of years. Quintus Prime, he didn't build weapons, didn't guard time or amplify warriors or study the laws of reality. Quintus Prime made life. His artifact, the Emberstone, could create brand new Cybertronian sparks from raw material, which makes him sound like the gentlest of the 13. The creator with no war agenda, no combat function, nothing that ends civilizations. And then you find out his greatest creation is the Quintessence, and the whole picture shifts. He built them to be administrators, helpers for new worlds, cold, efficient, organized, the perfect stewards for a universe that needed managing. What he got was a species that enslaved Cybertron, corrupted its history, and spent millions of years putting civilizations on trial for entertainment. He made them to help. They became judges who killed for fun. Amalgamus Prime, every other Prime had a fixed form, a defined shape that told you what they were and what they were built for. Amalgamus Prime didn't have any of that and didn't want it. He was the first Transformer to truly master transformation, a shapeshifter whose form was never set, never repeated unless he felt like it. And his artifact, the transformation cog, is why every Transformer that has ever lived can do the most basic thing that makes them Cybertronian. Without Amalgamus Prime, there's no rolling out, no jets, no cassettes unfolding mid-battle, just one mode forever for everyone. He handed the entire species its defining characteristic and then embodied it completely in himself. In a group of primes with massive cosmic responsibilities and ancient rigid purposes, Amalgamus was the one nobody could track or predict. Megatronus Prime, the Fallen. He wasn't evil at the start. That's the part that makes this interesting instead of simple. Primus created him to be entropy, the necessary end of things, the cosmic force that clears away what's run its course so new creation has room to exist. He wasn't a villain. He was physics with a face, and for a while that was fine. He stood with the 13, fought alongside them, was bonded to Solus Prime in a way that gave his purpose something to be anchored to. Then Solus died at his hands. Accident or betrayal, the other primes didn't wait to figure out which. They cast him out. And getting exiled by beings that Primus himself made did something to Megatronus that couldn't be undone. He swore himself to Unicron instead of Primus. Optimus. He took entropy, the force meant to serve cosmic balance, and pointed it at everything his former brothers and sisters cared about. His plan in Revenge of the Fallen, the sun harvester buried inside Earth's pyramids, wasn't a war strategy. Destroying a star doesn't just kill a planet. It kills every system that star supports. He wasn't planning a battle. He was planning an extinction. The Fallen is basically the origin story of every villain the franchise ever produced. Megatron named himself after this guy. That's how far downstream the damage went. Sentinel Prime. He looked exactly like what a Prime was supposed to look like. Battle-hardened, commanding, politically sharp. Before Optimus ever touched the Matrix, Sentinel Prime was the face of Autobot leadership, and he knew it. And in almost every version of his story, Sentinel Prime is really just a long, painful lesson about how being chosen doesn't make you worthy. In the animated series, he's arrogant, dismissive of humans, more interested in maintaining his authority than actually doing what the authority was supposed to be for. He has the title and none of what should come with it. In the live-action films, it goes darker. Sentinel Prime made a secret deal with Megatron. He agreed to hand Earth over to Decepticon control in exchange for saving Cybertron. He called it pragmatism. Every Autobot who died because of his betrayal would have called it something else. A Prime. One of the most powerful Autobots in history. And he decided the math just worked out better if a populated planet got sacrificed. Sentinel Prime is the cautionary version of everything Optimus represents. Optimus Prime. He started as Orion Pax, a dock worker, a young archivist in a society that had already decided he wasn't the kind of person who changed things. Alpha Trion saw something nobody else did and rebuilt him, and from that moment every choice Optimus made added something to what the title of Prime actually meant. He gave up certain victories because mercy mattered more. He carried the weight of being the last real hope for a civilization that had nearly destroyed itself. He died for Earth more than once and kept coming back. He brought humans into a war they had no business surviving and refused to treat them as lesser for being smaller or shorter-lived. He faced Megatron across 1,000 battlefields and never let hatred become the thing running the show on his end. The thing that actually separates Optimus from every Prime before and after him isn't raw power. Vector Prime was older. Solus Prime built more. Megatronus was more destructive. What Optimus had was that he made the job look like something he'd choose again every single time. Not because Rodimus Prime. He was never supposed to be this. Hot Rod was reckless and young, and almost always in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong moment. And then Optimus Prime died. And the Matrix needed someone. And the universe picked the kid who'd accidentally put himself between Optimus and Megatron at the worst possible second of the worst possible fight. The kid who spent the rest of his life quietly carrying the question of whether his interference contributed to the greatest loss the Autobots ever suffered. And then that same kid had to become a Prime in real time with an entire civilization watching. He doubted himself constantly and kept going anyway. He lived in Optimus's shadow even after Optimus was gone and kept moving forward through it anyway. When Unicron rose and the Matrix was the only thing that could stop him, Rodimus used it. He became something bigger than himself for one necessary moment, which is really all any Prime ever gets asked to do. The successor who never stopped being the kid who wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. That's Rodimus. And somehow that's exactly who the job needed. If you want to watch similar content in the future, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And stay tuned for the next video.